An MMA fighter stabbed a man to death in a hotel room. Andrew Osborne is a former MMA fighter. He's from Philadelphia and his professional career included 3 professional fights. He has 1 win and 2 losses. On the 23rd of September 2022, he was in a hotel room with another man. This was 47-year-old Brian Wilkinson from Egg Harbor Township. The pair were at the Ocean Casino Resort in Atlantic City. Now, although it's not known what the motive was for this attack, Andrew has admitted to stabbing the man to death before fleeing with his wife. The pair had made their way back to Philadelphia. Thankfully, police did manage to track Andrew down and then remand him in custody. Andrew, who is now 35 years old, has pleaded guilty to first-degree aggravated manslaughter. He is due to be sentenced for the killing in August this year.
Judith Love Cohen was an American aerospace engineer for NASA, and she's also Jack Black's mother. She created the abort guidance system that rescued the Apollo 13 astronauts. While she was in labor with Jack Black, she was still working on this from the hospital. She sent all the information over to her boss, and Jack Black was born shortly after. More fun facts about her: she also worked on a lot of projects with the Hubble telescope. And she was a ballet dancer. This lady could literally do it all. And because of the times back then, she also advocated strongly for women's workplace rights. If you're a 90s kid like me, we grew up with Jack Black just being plastered all over the screen, being in almost every movie and show you could think of. But I just thought it was so cool to share his mother's story because that's one side you don't really see. Like, you hear about Jack Black a lot, you don't hear about his mother and all of her accomplishments. But these two are very accomplished in their own ways, and it's awesome. As a space nerd, I'm still so hyped that she made that guidance system to save those Apollo 13 astronauts. If it wasn't for her, they probably all would have perished. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And as always, these videos are for informational purposes only.
A naked woman stole a police car and ran over a police officer. This case honestly sounds like the plot of a far-fetched film. It was the 13th of June 2022 in Chicago. Police officer Edward Popish was on duty and noticed something shocking. A naked woman named Whitney Temple was in West Garfield Park. Now, the officer parked his vehicle and got out in order to investigate. However, as he did this, Whitney took her chance to get inside the police car and drive it off. She ended up running him over with it to the point where he was concussed and needed stitches. She then sped off at 90 miles an hour down the expressway. She caused a huge crash involving 4 cars. Now, Whitney was charged with, wait for it, attempted first-degree murder, vehicular hijacking, possession of a stolen motor vehicle, aggravated battery of a peace officer, and resisting or obstructing a peace officer. Her defense argued that she was in a psychotic state at the time of the incident. Now, she actually was found not guilty by reason of insanity.
Hypnosis of Eugenio Derbez. You know who Eugenio Derbez is?
Yeah, of course.
Famous actor.
Familia Peluche. Instructions not included.
This hypnosis was considered lost media for a really long time. It wasn't until 2020 when someone recovered it and posted it up on YouTube. And basically the whole premise of the clip was Eugenio Derbez was on a broadcast, a Televisa broadcast for the 2006 World Cup. And he was basically going to be hypnotized by a man named Tony Camo. Eugenio was made to believe that he was 15 years old. And the only reason why was because the crew told Tony Camo that growing up, Eugenio was a very, very shy kid and a nervous kid, so they wanted to see him act that way. What the? Yeah. And Eugenio was told to tell a joke in front of everybody, which led him to have a panic attack. He ended up covering his eyes and basically crying. Let me know if you think if it's legit or if it's fake, because there's a lot of people still to this day that say it's probably fake because obviously Eugenio Derbez is like a good ass actor. He could easily just act like that, and a lot of people are saying it's real because of Eugenio Derbez's body language, the way his face looks.
It wasn't normal.
Duerme, ahora 3. Usted, venga. ¿Usted cómo se llama?
Eugenio.
Venga para acá.
No, yo prefiero no hacerlo.
No, usted quédese aquí.
No, yo prefiero no hacerlo, por favor. Le dice, ahí Luis allá.
¿Qué pasó? Al final del chiste, Eugenio.
You see his pants?
He pissed his pants?
Yes.
Teenagers have been charged after posting a Snapchat video of them stealing a necklace off a dead body. On the 27th of May, a video circulated on social media. Many are describing the video as deeply disturbing. The 2 teenagers from Texas posted the disgusting video to their Snapchat followers that left people absolutely mortified. Bethany Martin, aged 17, and a 16-year-old friend of hers, who is being kept anonymous due to her age, stumbled upon a dead body recently. They found a deceased man in a drainage ditch. The girls reportedly saw something that they didn't feel looked right and then went over to investigate. They realized when they got nearer what they had found. It was the body of a man, and rather than call for police and help immediately, they rang a male friend who came over, and they decided to steal some jewelry off the man's body. Horrifically, they filmed themselves taking his necklace off while laughing and joking. Tragically, the male's family member actually saw the video online. Horrified viewers notified police, and it was determined that the victim had actually unalived himself. He was 25-year-old Marcus Adams. Now, his family have actually set up a GoFundMe page in order to pay for his funeral costs. Bethany was charged with felony theft from a human corpse or grave. She's been released on $2,000 bail, according to police. As I said, the 16-year-old has been kept anonymous due to her age, but does face the same charge. The necklace has thankfully since been returned to the family of the victim.
This pedophile hunter was shot and killed, bringing a tragic end to his heroic hunt. This is Robert Wayne Lee II, otherwise known as Bupak Shakur. Before his death, Robert was an infamous online personality who frequently posed as a 15-year-old girl to lure in pedophiles. He would then expose these pedophiles, blast their names and information out, and he was really working to show the community that he lived in just how these people operate, how many of them are out there, and how dangerous they can be. Well, on September 29th, 2023, the unthinkable happened. At around 10:23 p.m. that evening, Robert walked into a restaurant called the Universal Coney Island in Pontiac, Michigan. It's unknown exactly to this day why Robert was in there, but according to security camera footage, when Robert walked inside, there was already an 18-year-old and a 16-year-old waiting to meet him. Now, at one point, security camera shows Robert actually approach these two in the booth that they were in and start confronting them. And at around the same time, the 16-year-old that was seated in that area pulled out a semi-automatic handgun, right after his friend pulled out a knife, and the 16-year-old then opened fire, killing Robert. The 16 and 18-year-old then fled the scene, leaving Robert to die. Now, after Robert, or Bupak, was killed, his loss was felt all over social media, and people even went to the restaurant where the shooting occurred and left tributes and memorials to him. Definitely sad to see someone's story end like this, especially when you consider all the good that they put out into the world and their time and effort spent hunting down these vile individuals. It's still unknown exactly why the shooting happened, if it was connected to one of his stings or not, but R.I.P. Bupak Shakur. If you want to hear more true crime stories, listen to the podcast Murder in America that I co-host with my wife Courtney. It's available on all streaming platforms.
In 2005, Maurice Els, a South African farmer, adopted this baby hippo and saved it from a river. If you know anything about hippos, they are one of the most aggressive creatures on earth. They will actively hunt anything, even humans. I'm sure you've seen videos of them chasing boats. Now, Maurice, the farmer, probably had not seen that at the time. 5 years after he saved Humphrey, Humphrey decided to drown him in the exact same river that he saved him in. On top of that, he mauled his entire body in that river too. The 40-year-old farmer who referred to Humphrey as a son was found just mauled and mangled in that river. The farmer would let military generals sit on his back, let people ride him, he was pretty domestic. Or so we all thought. Soon after, they would find him wandering on onto a golf course trying to attack people. The neighbors also warned Els that the hippo was just not as domesticated as it seemed. And that is why I have a cat and not a hippo. It's just really unfortunate because this farmer literally treated this hippo like a literal child. And in return, the hippo dragged him into the water, mauled him, drowned him. They didn't even know how long he'd been in the water when they found his body. Be very safe around animals, everybody. Their behavior is very unpredictable. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And as always, these videos are for informational purposes only.
Pedophiles in Japan are a major problem. We need to talk about this. So something I didn't realize was that CP, or CSAM, was 100% legal in Japan until 2014. That's right, it was completely legal until 2014. So that's disturbing, but we need to talk about JK Alley, or Schoolgirl Alley, in Tokyo. Basically, this is an alleyway in Tokyo where minors, girls that are actually all underage, sit along the street and offer their time to strangers for money. Men can go pay these girls to hold their hands and go for a walk, go for a cup of coffee. And keep in mind, all these girls are legitimately under 18 years old, and they volunteer to do this. Men can even pay to go sleep in a girl's lap. And in some bars, you can take an underage girl dressed as a schoolgirl in there, pay around 35 pounds, and you can sit there with that girl of your choice for 40 minutes and have unlimited booze. In some of these cafes, the men actually pay for what's called walking dates, meaning that they take these girls out on 40-minute and hour-long walks. And it's unknown what they do during these walks, but the girls are basically allowed to do anything. It's up to them and the client. And all of this is completely legal. In 2018, it was estimated that 5,000 minors worked on this street and in these cafes. And all of these children aren't just cosplaying schoolgirls, they are actually minors who are in high school. I mean, this is really incredibly disturbing stuff. And then we can get into something called Chaku Arrow, which is known as a suggestively clothed soft corn. And there is no age limit in producing this material. In fact, one producer of these photos and videos who was interviewed by the BBC said, "My youngest was 6 years old. This is a quote. We filmed her in her bathing costume playing with some toys. Her mom was standing behind the camera holding her favorite toys so she would face the camera." The producer then said that the DVD he produced and sold of the 6-year-old made him around 35,000 pounds. And he said that senior high school girls make around 7,000 pounds. Now, all of this stuff is extremely incredibly disturbing. Everything that I've covered is. But it's all legal in Japan. I just wanted to spread some awareness here and tell you guys about this because I could not believe when I read it that up until 2014, CP/CSAM was completely legal in Japan. I mean, what the hell? And if you want to hear more true crime stories, listen to my podcast, Murder in America, that I co-host with my wife, Courtney. It's available on all streaming platforms.
This necklace saved a man's life after he was shot. It was the 28th of May 2024 in Colorado. An argument broke out which very nearly ended up being fatal. A man was shot as a result of a dispute, but what he was wearing that day undoubtedly saved his life. An apparent fake silver necklace that he had on that day was literally the only reason he survived. He was hit by a .22 caliber bullet, but the chain he was wearing caused the bullet to become lodged. He therefore only suffered a minor puncture wound due to the necklace getting in the way. Police posted the image on their social media and stated that the bullet, quote, would have ended up in the victim's neck if it had not instead become lodged in the chain. Now, the suspect in this case is kept anonymous so far, but he was arrested and is facing attempted murder charges.
Was this young mother killed to protect a pedophile ring? This is one of the most disturbing stories I've ever read about, so viewer discretion is advised. Brittany Nicole Wood has been missing for almost 12 years. 19-year-old Brittany, a single mother herself, was last seen on May 30th, 2012. On that day, Brittany left her mother's home to go visit her Uncle Donnie, and she never returned home. 2 days after that, her Uncle Donnie was found off of a beaten path in his truck with a gunshot wound to the head. Now, this story has a lot of key players, but I'm going to keep it brief. So after Brittany's disappearance, 11 people were arrested on child sex abuse charges. This included some of Brittany's family members and some of her friends. I'm going to read you this quote from the lead prosecutor in the case. He told local news, pretty much everyone in this extended family was having sex with one another and having sex with the children. So basically when Brittany went missing, this entire pedophile ring, incest circle was busted wide open. So right after Brittany went missing, a number of people, including her own mother pictured here, went to the media and stated, "We need to find Brittany." However, just years later, Chessie, Brittany's mother, would plead guilty and basically admit that she was a part of this abuse ring that victimized children and even their own family members. Now, there are a lot of theories here as to what may have happened to Brittany, but one of the main things that people bring up is that Brittany was most likely a victim of her own friends and family's sex abuse ring. She had probably been abused for years, and possibly she was about to bring this whole thing to the police. Something else that came to light later on was that Donnie Holland, Brittany's uncle who took his own life, was the day he died set to meet with a county investigator. So the thought was that Donnie was most likely going to come clean about everything that had been happening, and that would have busted this whole thing wide open. Now, because there are so many friends and family members involved in this disgusting pedophile ring, we know some of the players, but we still don't know the full extent to what was happening here. We don't know if there were any other people involved. There are plenty of things that haven't been explored or talked about here. But the biggest mystery to me in this case is what happened to Brittany. To this day, nobody has ever been charged with Brittany's murder, and no trace of her has ever been found. No, none of her belongings, not her phone, none of her clothing items that she had on when she was last seen, nothing has ever been found. If you want to hear more true crime stories, listen to the podcast Murder in America that I co-host with my wife Courtney. It's available on all streaming platforms.
There's been a horrific shooting in Texas in which a 10-year-old girl was the only survivor. On the 30th of May at around 5 p.m., gunshots could be heard in Spring in Texas. It's believed that a shooting occurred at an apartment complex involving 2 adults and a child. The female victim is said to have been 33 and the mother to the 10-year-old girl. The male was 39 years old. Police state that the male was the mother's boyfriend. He's believed to have shot the mother in a dispute and the child was caught in the crossfire. The man is then said to have turned the gun on himself. Although tragically the mother passed away, after being shot in the stomach, the 10-year-old girl miraculously survived. It's reported that she bravely managed to call her nan to get help. Her nan then called 911 and officers raced to the scene. The child was airlifted to hospital and underwent life-saving surgery. She is currently believed to be in the custody of her grandmother. Police have called the incident a murder self-unaliving and aren't looking for any other suspects.
What I'm about to explain is one of the worst animal attacks ever caught on camera, and this is a massive trigger warning. This brutal video that I'm about to explain is only 1 minute long and is thought to have been filmed on December 22nd, 2014 in India. The backstory behind the video is very simple. On the morning of December 22nd, a group of hunters went out to hunt a sloth bear near the town of Surjapur. The reason they went out for the hunt was because of an increase in bear attacks on humans in the local area. A few days before the video was filmed, it is said that a female bear went into the local village and ransacked multiple homes, and even mauled a local to death. And obviously this caused a lot of panicking in the area, which is why the hunt took place, which was organized by the local forest department. The man in the video is referred to online as KP Singh, who was a forest worker. It is said that he had been tracking the bear for a while and even set up a trap to trap the dangerous predator. But he was then ambushed and mauled. His piercing screams got the attention of his colleagues, who would rush to the scene, and one of the victim's fellow hunters filmed the disturbing encounter. The clip is only 52 seconds, but the brutality of the video makes those 52 seconds feel like forever. I can't imagine the fear and pain the forest worker went through. As you play the video, you see a man who is wearing a green shirt laid out on the floor with a female sloth bear on top of him. And immediately, you hear the screams of the victim. And they are different from normal screams. I can't explain it, but they are truly disturbing. As the camera zooms in, you see the bear who has almost mounted the victim and has its jaws clamped around the victim's face. It looks like the bear is going for the throat. You hear loud commotion in the background as the crowd tries to distract the bear from the attack by shooting guns and throwing rocks at it. As the man wrestles for his life under the bear, you can see some of his injuries with his face and throat covered in blood, and the ground beneath his head stained with blood. You can see the bear bite his face and pull, ripping a chunk of flesh from his face. The bear then shakes its head to get rid of the blood on its face. It then goes in for another bite, and this time biting the poor man's throat and once again pulling its head away very sharply. It's hard to tell, but it appears a chunk of flesh is hanging from the victim's head. The video then concludes as the man is still getting mauled. According to reports, the attack lasted 10 minutes before the bear was finally shot and killed, though due to the man's injuries, he would later die. There's not much more information about this attack, but what you see on the video is absolutely disturbing, and the screams you hear are some of the worst screams you will ever hear.
This Disney employee was crushed to death while working a shift at Disneyland. This is Deborah Debbie Gale Stone. And in 1974, she graduated high school in California and got a job at Disneyland. Now, Deborah was your everyday Californian girl. She grew up visiting Disneyland, so when she got the opportunity to work there, she took it. Unfortunately, though, Deborah ended up working at the America Sings attraction in Disneyland. The America Sings attraction featured a number of animatronic animals that would sing American tunes from different periods in America's musical history. The main mascot was Sam the Eagle, and needless to say, he's a little creepy. Basically, on the ride, you would sit in a seat and then you would be rotated around 6 fixed theaters where these animals would sing. But unfortunately, on July 8th, 1974, only 9 days after the attraction opened, an infamous incident would occur. So still to this day, nobody knows exactly what happened, But inside of the ride, there was a narrow passageway between the rotating seats and the fixed stages. And at 10:37 p.m. that evening, Deborah either jumped onto the tracks, she fell down there, or she attempted to jump from one stage to the other, but suddenly the carousel started to move. Deborah's body was then caught in between the rotating wall and the fixed wall, and she was literally crushed to death. Now, disturbingly, some audience members who were actually there reported hearing screams. Some people on the ride even thought these screams were a part of the attraction. But within 20-25 minutes, Deborah was found and pronounced dead. When her body was located, she had already been dead for an extended period of time, and this was a horrific, gruesome way to go. The ride, though, only stayed closed for 3 days before reopening. It was then eventually replaced by Innoventions, another Disney ride, and in 2015 it was converted to a Star Wars-themed area. This story is just horrific, though, and it's crazy that things like this still happen in the happiest place on Earth. If you want to hear more true crime stories, we actually did a whole podcast about accidents like this that happened at Disney. Be sure to listen to the podcast Murder in America that I co-host with my wife Courtney. It's available on all streaming platforms.
Time. Ready? All right. Ready to throw it at me? 3, 2, 1.
That was some of the last footage ever recorded of American Otto Warmbier, who shortly after that video became a prisoner of the North Korean regime. So before all of this, Otto was your everyday kid from Cincinnati, Ohio. And in late 2015, early 2016, he booked a danger tour, where he and a group of others would be flown into North Korea. Now, according to everyone else that was on the trip with Otto, he acted very normally throughout the entire trip. These are some of his belongings that he left there in North Korea. But as he was preparing to leave the country with the rest of his tour group, he was arrested at the airport, and he would return home to America in a vegetative state. So no one knew what happened to Otto, but eventually a video was released by the North Korean government where he was begging for forgiveness, talking about how he stole some sort of a sign, and how he had tried to subvert the people of North Korea against their supreme leader. All of this obviously is untrue, but according to North Korea, they had video footage of Otto stealing a propaganda poster in his hotel, which I guess is very extremely illegal in North Korea. They even leaked this security camera footage which allegedly shows Otto stealing the poster, even though many people agree that this probably isn't Otto. You can't make out any details on the figure, and it really could just be anyone. So eventually, after being charged with subversion, Otto was tried in North Korea, found guilty, and sentenced to 15 years of hard labor. All the while, Otto's parents were desperately trying to make contact with their son. They weren't allowed to speak with him, and they truthfully, after this trial, had no idea if he was alive or dead. Eventually, though, Donald Trump was able to broker some sort of a deal. Shockingly, it's alleged that the US government paid $2 million to the North Korean officials for the release of Otto. And this came after more than a year of bargaining and trying to get the North Korean people to let this American citizen return to his home country. However, when Otto emerged from the plane back on US soil, he was in a vegetative state. He kept screaming, he couldn't talk, he couldn't move, he was being fed through a feeding tube, and shortly after arriving back in the United States, Otto died. Now, North Korean officials have never come clean about exactly what happened to Otto. North Korean officials stated he was treated properly the entire time and with respect, but other prisoners that were there with Otto claimed that he might have been waterboarded, he was most likely beaten and physically tortured, and others have claimed that Otto was probably poisoned or targeted with bioweapons inside one of the prison camps in North Korea, meaning that whichever way you cut it, Otto's death was horrific, and nobody officially faced any repercussions for this. It definitely heightened tensions between North Korea and America, but no one was ever charged for his death, no one was ever held responsible, and justice in the story of Otto Warmbier is completely non-existent. We actually covered this story in depth on our podcast Murder in America recently on Patreon, so if you want to hear the full story, you can listen to our show anywhere you can stream podcasts.
These are twisted murder cases you've never heard of, and this is a massive trigger warning. This case takes place in Indonesia on May 12, 2016. Ino Ferrara was an 18-year-old woman who had recently graduated from a vocational school, and after graduation, she began working in an office of a plastics factory. The factory was some time away from her parents' home, but it did have accommodations for both men and women that was separated between genders. Ino lived in the company's accommodation just outside the factory, and every week she would return to her parents' house for a night or two and spend time with her family. Eno was the fourth of 7 children, and she and her family were followers of Islam. And because of this, she was arranged to be married to a man at some point. However, in April 2016, Eno was walking back to her accommodations after a day at work when she bumped into a teenager who was referred to on the media as R.A. The two talked and exchanged numbers, and for the next month the two texted often and started somewhat of a relationship. At the time, R.A. was 16 and was a student at a neighboring high school. On May 12, 2016, Eno asked R.A. to come to her accommodation. She told him because of the arranged marriage, the month-long relationship had to come to an end, and the two decided to meet to say goodbye. At 11:30 that night, R.A. arrived at the women's section of the accommodation. Eno met him and at the gate let him in, and the two talked in her room. Inside, the two spoke for about 30 minutes and began to kiss, but before long, R.A. began to remove his clothes, but Eno told R.A. she had no interest in anything further. She was worried about the risk of getting pregnant and ignored his advances. Feeling angry and rejected, R.A. got dressed and left Eno's apartment. He then stood in the section between the female and male dormitories, and it's here where R.A. stumbled across 2 men, 24-year-old Ramad Hatano and 24-year-old Haman Hoparati. These 2 men worked at the plastics factory and stayed in the men's dormitory. The 2 men asked R.A. what he was doing, and he said he had been in a relationship with a woman who worked in the plastics factory, but the relationship had just come to an end. They all talked for a while, and the 2 men then wanted to see which factory worker was his girlfriend, and they then told him to take them to her room. There was a gate separating the girls' dormitories so nobody could get in, but R.A. didn't close it properly, so the 3 were able to get inside. The 3 then crept up to Eno's dormitory and twisted her door handle, and it was unlocked. The 3 then entered her room and stood over her as she slept. Ramad and Haman both recognized her from working with her. Haman had worked in the same section as Eno and had taken a liking to her. He even got her number from another worker and sent Eno messages, but Eno never replied to a message he sent. Ramad also knew who Eno was. He claimed that she called him ugly and that his skin was too dark. Iman then got one of the pillows off Eno's bed and placed it over her mouth and began to smother her. Eno then woke up and a struggle ensued. Iman then pulled a fork out of his pocket and began to stab Eno in the face multiple times, while Ramad pinned her down. The 2 men then ordered R.A. to grab a knife from the kitchen. However, he couldn't find one, so he went to the garden area and found a garden hoe. He came back to the room to see Iman still holding the pillow, which was now soaked with blood, over Eno's face. Iman then told R.A. to strike Eno in the face with the metal head of the hoe. R.A. then raised the hoe and struck Eno in the face once. This stunned her and she stopped resisting. Iman and Ramad then forced themselves upon Eno while R.A. stood guard by the door. After the 2 men were done, they told R.A. that it was his turn. He tried, but he wasn't able to. He would later say the blood coming from Eno's face turned him off, so instead he began to bite Eno's legs and breasts. Now, what I'm about to explain is absolutely sickening, and this is a massive, massive trigger warning. Ramad picked up the gardening hoe and inserted it into Eno's genitals. He then began to kick the metal head of the hoe, resulting in the handle impaling and rupturing Eno's internal organs, ending her life. 90% of the hoe handle had been kicked inside Eno. After killing her, the 3 took turns washing blood off their bodies. And before leaving the crime scene, they took Eno's things and phone and piled her clothes on top of her where her body was. They did this to mask the smell of decomposition that would happen in the next couple days. When Eno never turned up to work, her friends began to worry. They called her and texted her but didn't get a reply. They then went to her place and knocked, but when Eno didn't answer, they broke into the place. And once inside, they were met with a disturbing scene. Police were called, and Eno's body was taken away and an autopsy was conducted. The cause of death was from massive internal bleeding caused by the garden hoe. 23 inches of the handle had been kicked inside Eno, damaging her heart, lungs, and many other organs. You can see the x-ray photo of this on the internet, but I can't show it on here and it's awfully disturbing. In a matter of days, all 3 boys were arrested and charged with the murder of Eno. All 3 boys had a reason to why they killed Eno also. R.A. claimed he did this because Eno rejected him and he didn't like the arranged marriage. Ramad said that Eno had been rude to him, and Iman said that she ignored his text messages. The police then forced the men to reenact the murder, which was televised, and the video of the reenactment could be found on YouTube, and it is super disturbing to watch. Both Iman and Ramad were found guilty and sentenced to death by firing squad. R.A. was also found guilty, but due to his age, he was only sentenced to 10 years in prison. I also have to warn you that if you research this case further, images of the crime scene are very easy to find and they are extremely disturbing. What these three boys did to Eno is just horrific, and I can't even imagine the fear and pain she must have been experiencing. May Eno rest in peace. You did not deserve this at all.
However, coined the phrase, "You can't make this stuff up," might have known the story of real-life boogeyman, Albert Fish. A slight, elderly man with grey hair, no one suspected the kindly single father of being sadistic child murderer and cannibal.
We're asleep, and she gets up to go to the bathroom, and I'm like, oh man, I have to go to the bathroom too. So I'm going to go to the bathroom in the main bathroom outside the room. I go out, I come back in, and I'm like, why'd you turn my light on my side of the bed? Like, it's 12, we're going to bed. Like, we're in bed. She's like, I didn't do it. I thought you did. I'm like, okay, well, somebody's trying to get our attention. My phone rings. It's my little sister. She says, hey, Bob, sorry, are you awake? And I'm like, I am now. I go, my light just came on. She goes, that's why I was calling you. She said, is Nicole there? I'm like, yeah. She put her on speaker. She said, Nicole, I don't want to get personal, but did your mom have miscarriages before you? And she's like, yeah. She goes, I'm seeing 3 people in the room right now trying to get your attention. And they're your 2 brothers and your sister that weren't born.
There's actually a dark, terrifying origins to the Amber Alert. This happened in 1996 in Arlington, Texas. And it was a little girl called Amber Hagerman, who was 9 years old. And she was riding her bike at her grandparents' house along with her brother Ricky. Next to the grandparents' house was a supermarket, which was abandoned. Basically, they're riding their bike there, you know, having fun and all. The little brother decided to go back to the house. So she stayed at the parking lot. That's when a black pull-up truck pulled up to her. A man got out of the truck, grabbed Amber, threw her inside the truck, and he dipped immediately. Now, luckily, a witness was able to, see it happen from his backyard. So he called the cops immediately. The cops showed up pretty fast, bro. Like, within minutes. It was pretty fast. So there was a huge search for Amber all over Texas, basically, hoping that they could find her and see who abducted her. Even with all that happening, bro, like, they still couldn't find her. About 4 days later, there was a man who was walking his dog at midnight.
Haven't seen this photo on the internet as of late. This is just moments before 12-year-old Emma Brown took her gun and used it on her father and then herself. Last September, Emma and another 12-year-old friend devised a plan to murder Emma's family and her pets and then run away to Georgia together. Shortly after this photo, she then proceeds to shoot her father in the stomach and then run toward her driveway to take her family car to meet with her friend about 230 miles away. It's believed in this moment that Emma might have panicked and then shot herself in the process. The thing that's raised a concern is, as of right now, Emma's friend, who hasn't been publicly identified, is believed to have planned the entire ordeal. One of the biggest discussions as of late is that Emma's family had no idea how her and her friend had actually met, but she has been arrested and charged with a conspiracy to commit murder. The father did end up surviving the incident, but now conversations are being struck throughout the entire internet about whether or not parents know who their children's friends are. The police have also raised concerns and reports blaming social media for this occurrence. So the question now is, was this a preventable incident?
He was friendly and he was nice and he was so funny. He was so funny. He would always have me laughing. We used to play this game called Kick the Can, and he was the fastest runner, so we always wanted to be on his team.
Richard's friend Patricia found him kind and caring.
If we wanted to take a shortcut to school, we had to cut through this really tough neighborhood. And he always used to wait for me, sitting on a little pony wall, and then he would walk me to school. It was always safer, to be in twos, I guess. He used to sit in back of me in 5th grade, and I remember that he would poke me in the back. And every time he would poke me, I would jump up. And so that time that he kept poking me, I turned around very upset, and I said, hey, stop. And I remember him like slumping over and then just hitting the floor on the side.
He would have seizures. He would be shaking. We knew he was sick.
Third murder, which is the second incident, okay? I'm in the middle of trying to get my record sealed, right? Thursday night, I killed her. I took off Friday. I didn't go to work. I called in sick, took CTO, all right? Dismembered her body, got rid of her body, but kept her head in her hands because they're identifiable. They're highly identifiable. I kept those at the apartment, okay? That Friday night, Thursday night, I took her. Friday morning, she was dismembered. Friday night, she was disposed of, right? Saturday morning, I left, right? And I wasn't satisfied that I took the head along in the hands, but I couldn't put them someplace that could be sure they would be dug up by an animal or just be somewhere. It's scary going out there trying to bury somebody or dispose of body parts in a community or out even in the boonies where you don't know where you're at and who can come up at any moment. I had some real close calls there where people that come out of nowhere. And if a body's found and they remember this beige-looking car sitting there the night, that's evidence. So it was very, very hard to get rid of this stuff.
For the record, you are guilty of killing many women and girls.
Yes. Yes, that's true.
Ted, how did it happen? Take me back. What are the antecedents of the behavior that we've seen? So much grief, so much sorrow, so much pain for so many people. Where did it start? How did this moment come about?
I grew up in a wonderful home with two dedicated and loving parents, one of 5 brothers and sisters. But as a young boy, and I mean a boy of 12 or 13 certainly, that I encountered outside the home again, the local grocery store, the local drugstore, the softcore pornography, what people call softcore. As young boys do, we explored the back roads and sideways and byways of our neighborhood, and oftentimes people would dump the garbage and whatever they were cleaning out of their house, and from time to time we'd come across pornographic books of a harder nature than more graphic, you might say, more explicit nature than we would encounter, let's say, in your local grocery store.
2022, the town of Slaughter, Louisiana, was shaken by the death of 36-year-old Lacey Fletcher. Lacey suffered from a medical condition known as locked-in syndrome, making her almost completely paralyzed. Due to her medical condition, Lacey spent all of her life at home, as she began to develop some degree of Asperger's syndrome. Lacey's parents were her caretakers, although they neglected that responsibility and treated Lacey inhumanely, leaving her to relieve herself on the same couch that she spent most of her life. Lacey's neighbors stated that the last time they saw her in public was 15 years before this incident. At the time of her death, Lacey weighed 96 pounds and had contracted COVID-19. On January 3rd, 2022, Lacey was found dead in a couch covered in feces and urine. It was believed that she was in that same spot for years without being catered to. Her body was covered in ulcers, her hair matted and filled with maggots. Her parents, Sheila and Clay Fletcher, were charged with second-degree murder and detained for the severe chronic neglect. Despite all of this, they pleaded not guilty and were released on bail. Sheila and Clay Fletcher will begin trial on June 19th, 2023.
This influencer's body parts were found in pots of human soup just last month. On the 15th of February, 28-year-old model Abby Choi posted a beautiful photo on her Instagram. She had no idea of her horrific fate less than 2 weeks later. On February the 25th, 2023, police made a horrifying discovery. A splatter-proof makeshift butcher's workshop was found in a rented 3-story home. Inside of the home, they found 2 human legs in a fridge and Abby's decapitated head in a soup pot. Alongside the head, carrots and radishes were also in the process of being cooked. Minced human meat was also found at the scene. In the rented flat, police found a homemade butcher's shop equipped with meat grinders, chainsaws and meat cleavers. Abby's handbag was also found at the scene, including her ID, which helped to identify her. Heartbreakingly, Abby was a mother of 4 young children. Police in Hong Kong have charged Abby's ex-husband, Alex Kwong, his father and brother with the murder. It's alleged that the 3 men rented an apartment where they'd meticulously planned the murder. It's also alleged that the motive for the killing was a family dispute over money. Abby's children are now being looked after by her mother.
Yeah. And you asked me to come here from California because you had something you wanted to say. It is not just an interview with a man who's scheduled to die tomorrow morning. I'm here and you're here because of this message that you're talking about right here. You really feel that hardcore pornography and the doorway to it, softcore pornography, is doing untold damage to other people and causing other women to be abused and killed the way you did others.
Listen, I'm no social scientist, and I haven't done a survey. I mean, I don't pretend that I know what John Q. Citizen thinks about this. But I've lived in prison for a long time now, and I've met a lot of men who were motivated to commit violence just like me. And without exception, every one of them was deeply involved in pornography, without question, without exception, deeply influenced and consumed by an addiction to pornography. There's no question about it. The FBI's own study on serial homicide shows that the most common interest among serial killers
Yeah. 911, where's your emergency?
I just killed someone. 100, Route 46.
What do you mean you just killed someone?
Exactly what I said. I'm armed and dangerous.
Where are you?
You know what? I'm armed, I'm dangerous, send the cops out. I'm in a parking lot, I can see from every angle. I will shoot at anyone who approaches the car.
Okay. How many people did you hurt?
You know, I'm not in a condition to talk.
Okay, can you at least tell me what city you're in so I can send the police out there?
Mountain Lake.
You're in Mountain Lakes?
Yeah.
How many people did you kill? Just one person?
Just one person.
Just one person?
I'm reloading right now. I'm going to shoot at anybody that approaches the car.
Okay, that's not a problem, sir. I'd advise you not to reload and do that, but... What's your name? You just hung up on me.
10-year-old serial killer. Viewer discretion is advised. This is Mary Bell, and she could easily be one of the most sadistic murderers in history, even though she was only 10 years old. Mary allegedly grew up being abused, and her mother would even sell her to other men at the age of 5. All of this abuse fueled this anger inside of her, and she had to find some sort of way to release it. On May 11th, 1968, Mary Bell was playing with a little 3-year-old toddler, and he mysteriously fell off of an air raid shelter. This was the start of her violent outrage. Just 2 weeks later, on March 25th, the boy Martin Brown's body was found dead inside of an abandoned building. It was later discovered that Mary lured this little boy into this abandoned building and strangled him with her bare hands. 2 years later, Mary then strangled a 3-year-old boy and carved the letter M into his stomach with a razor blade. And then she used scissors to cut and mutilate the body. Mary eventually confessed to this by writing notes because she was bragging about it, and the police arrested her. Here's the crazy thing. She was arrested and released just a couple years later, and today she could possibly still be alive. One of the terms for her confession was that after she was released, her name would be changed and everything. The latest information we have of her is pretty much she had a daughter when she got released, and nobody knows where she's at now. So what do you think? Do you think she should be forgiven because she was a child, or do you think that fire is still inside of her waiting to strike again? Let me know in the comments down below, and make sure to like and follow for more videos.
One of the strangest missing persons cases I've ever seen revolves around someone that might not even exist. Let me explain. In 1989, a local Chicago television station called WMAQ was wrapping up their regularly scheduled television for the night, when all of a sudden the audio was cut and the image on screen was changed to a strange missing persons panel. The image of the individual shown was too low quality to make out any details, and no information other than the woman's name, Joanna Lopez, were given. The broadcast wouldn't be too out of the ordinary if it wasn't for the fact that she was never mentioned anywhere again. And when people tried to find her, they found no records of a woman named Joanna Lopez in Chicago, even with police filings. So, who was this woman in the broadcast? And how did a missing persons panel for her end up on the news? Well, when the news agency was asked about the panel, they claimed it was sent by an anonymous person, which leaves us with the most likely answer being that it was a prank or an alternate reality game. And as for who was actually in the photo, the lead seems to be a woman by the name of Rachel Lopez. A photo of her was found in a West Chicago yearbook from 1990, and although she has a different first name than Joanna, the fact that they look so similar and share a last name leads many to believe that she could be the one in the photo. Sadly though, it seems like we may never know for sure, as no one has been able to contact the woman in the yearbook.
In 2007, Knoxville, Tennessee was rocked by the brutal murder of 21-year-old Shannon Christian and 23-year-old Christopher Newsom. Shannon and Christopher were headed to a party on the night of January 6th. When they didn't show up to the party, the couple's friends started texting and calling them, but received no response. Around 11 p.m. that evening, a couple of their friends went to Shannon's apartment to see if they were there. Shannon and Christopher were not at the apartment, and they were unable to locate Shannon's SUV. It turns out that the couple were victims of a carjacking and kidnapping. The couple was taken to a rental home where they were essayed, tortured, and murdered. A witness arrived at work around 12:30 a.m. on January 7th. He noticed that the lights of the rental home were on and the home seemed quite busy for that time of night. The witness later observed a white 4Runner slowly drive by him with 4 men in the car. Another witness stated that they heard gunshots around 1:45 a.m. near the railroad tracks. That afternoon, around 12 p.m., Christopher's body was found near the tracks, wrapped in a comforter. Shannon was failing to respond to calls and text messages all day long. Using the last ping from her cell phone, authorities found her white 4Runner. On January 9th, authorities went to the rental home and found her body in a trash can in the kitchen. There were 5 people who helped commit this sickening crime, 4 of which were convicted to life in prison without parole, and 1 was convicted to the death penalty.
911, what's the location of the emergency? Please help me! Yes, what address do you need help? I'm not on an address, I'm on a road on Myers Road! He's trying to kill me! Which road are you on? Myers Road in Oregon City! Okay, do you have an address? Listen. Be late, come on, get a cop here now! Okay, who's trying to kill you? My husband! He's trying to pick up truck! Okay, what? He's trying to kill me! Come on! He's trying to pay! And what kind of gun does he have? Ma'am? Ma'am? I've got... Ma'am, take a deep breath so I can understand you. Ma'am? I've already got help coming. I need you to tell me wire and what? On plan. I'm on plan. Wire. Just a minute. I'm walking. He shot me. Okay, you're on wire at Glenview Court? He shot me. Okay, where did he shoot you? In the chest. In the chest? He's over there.
Baby Burger, uno de los casos más traumáticos, atroces y perturbadores de la Deep Web. Todo comienza con una cámara de seguridad apuntando hacia una calle, en donde se observa a una mujer que va caminando con su bebé. Sabemos que es una bebé, porque la madre dio su declaración a la policía de lo que pasó aquella vez. Después, se observa que un automóvil llega y 2 sujetos salen rápidamente. Uno de ellos toma a la mujer y la empuja, mientras que el otro sujeto toma a la bebé y la mete dentro del automóvil para así escapar. La toma del video continúa en un bosque. Los sujetos aparecen con un pasamontañas, para no ser identificados. Proceden a sacar a la bebé del automóvil, para llevarla a lo más profundo del bosque, hasta llegar a un lugar donde hay una mesa muy grande. El otro sujeto procede a traer un aparato, el cual en este momento del video está cubierto por una tela amarilla. Uno de los sujetos toma a la bebé y la coloca en la mesa, para empezar a abusar de ella, en un terrible acto donde escuchamos los gritos que son desgarradores. El volumen del video sube exageradamente, provocando la risa de uno de los sujetos. Después, procede a darle algunas bofetadas, a lo que comienza a sangrar de la boca. Uno de los sujetos toma a la bebé de los pies, el otro, toma el artefacto quitándole la tela amarilla. Vemos que es una máquina para triturar troncos de árboles. Encienden la máquina y el sujeto posa frente a la cámara, dejando caer a la bebé. La cámara hace un enfoque a la caída de la bebé en dicha máquina, a lo que ésta se llena de sangre, igual que las camisas de los dos sujetos. Finalmente, la cámara enfoca a la carne molida que sale de la máquina, para que los dos sujetos comiencen a comerla.
If I didn't know this was a true crime case, I would think it was a disturbing horror film. On the morning of the 7th of October 2022, a barefoot woman was running around Excelsior Springs, Missouri, bashing on people's doors. Witnesses describe her looking like she came straight from a horror film and she was calling for help. She'd been beaten, held captive, and SA'd for weeks. The woman was a shocking sight. She was covered in injuries and was wearing a bin bag. Disturbingly, she was gasping for breath as she had a very tight metal collar locked round her neck. It was a nurse who opened the door to her and let her come in. The nurse started to call police, and at this point the woman panicked. She warned her that the captor would kill her and claimed that he had killed her two friends. When police got there, the woman explained that a man called Timothy had captured her the month prior. He'd been holding her hostage this whole time. She said he'd been keeping her locked in the basement and had been SAing her. Disturbingly, she told police that he actually had a young son who lived at the house with him. When Timothy had taken his young son to school the one day, she used it as her opportunity to escape. Police made their way to the home of 39-year-old Timothy Haslett Jr. and found the property did in fact have a basement like the woman described. Timothy was arrested and is facing 9 charges including first-degree kidnapping. He's being held on a $3 million bond and faces 5 life sentences. Before his arrest, police were actually called to his address 3 times. Twice they were asked to do welfare checks, and this was from an employer and also family members. Police have searched his home with cadaver dogs and they haven't yet released what they know.
What? Look in there, mate. Look in there. What? Look in there.
Mysterious case absolutely does not sit right with me. Someone knows something and has not come forward. On the 12th of July 2015, 18-year-old Tiffany and her parents attended a graduation party in New Jersey. At around 9 p.m, one of Tiffany's friends spoke to her parents and claimed that they were really annoyed because Tiffany had used their debit card without permission. Tiffany initially denied this to her friend, but then did admit this to her mum Diane a little bit later. At this point, they were all outside Tiffany's house and Diane went inside to find her husband. When she returned outside of the house, Tiffany had vanished. Now, they were able to see Tiffany on the deer cameras that they had outside the house. She appears to be walking down the driveway in her normal clothing and white headband. When they tried to find Tiffany, they actually made a terrifying discovery. Her phone was lying on the floor at the bottom of the driveway. Immediately, they knew something was wrong as Tiffany never had her phone out of her sight. At 11:30 p.m, her family called the police. Little did they know, 27 minutes earlier, Tiffany had been hit by a train. Frustratingly, pretty much straight away, police presumed this death to be a self-unaliving. However, that just didn't seem to fit with the evidence presented. All of Tiffany's family and friends said how much of an upbeat person she was and that she was really happy at the time. She was making plans for the future, and the autopsy also showed that she had a clean toxicology report. Now, in the deer cam footage, she was fully clothed, but when she was found, she was just in her underwear with no shoes on. Upsettingly, 2 weeks after her death, Tiffany's mum actually found her missing trainers and headband more than a mile away from the tracks. Could someone have murdered Tiffany and then dumped her body on the train tracks to make it look like she did this herself? Tiffany's parents certainly think so. They definitely suspect some foul play was involved.
This is Japan's youngest murdered at only 11 years old. Nevada murdered her best friend.
I honestly think this is one of the most interesting and messed up cases ever. And if you haven't heard about this case, click in that video and she'll give you the gist of what happened. When I first heard about this case, I saw every video, read every article about it. Anything I could find, I saw it or read it. And after so much research about it, I found some things that not a lot of people know about this case. For example, the first thing is this is not Nevada. This is somebody wearing a costume of Nevada. Yes, a costume, like in Halloween, dressing up as an 11-year-old murderer. This is an actual picture of her, one of few pictures that we have of actual Nevada. There's a lot of more pictures of people dressing up as her, but I don't want to show them because some are really gruesome and I just don't think there's anything cute or funny about dressing up as a murderer. So yeah, some even try to make it sexy. It's just I don't know, I just think it's weird. Another thing is that, I mean, this is not the real girl, but for the sake of the video, the actual Nevada, that's not her real name. Nevada is not her name. It's just what people started calling her because she had that sweater on when she did the murder. Nevada Tan. Due to Nevada being so young at the time of the murder, her name was not sent to public to keep her safe in her identity. We never know her name because now she's out of jail and she has changed her name, probably changed states. She could be in the US, we don't know. But yeah, we're probably never gonna know her name.
This is one of the most disgusting and evil cases I've heard of recently. On the 7th of December 2017, teacher Thelma Boinville was desperately trying to make some extra money. She was doing a cleaning job to earn extra money for her family, and the job suited her as her 8-year-old could come along and play while she worked. This was really handy as it meant she didn't have to fork out for childcare. She set out cleaning some holiday homes on the day in question and her daughter waited in the car. The spot was a lovely scenic place called Kelky Beach. However, instead of walking in on a normal holiday rental to clean, she walked into a nightmare. Stephen Brown and his girlfriend Hayley Dangerand were in the middle of robbing the place. They were scouring through drawers and wardrobes, hunting for valuables to steal. With Thelma walking in, their plan had been foiled. They decided they needed to dispose of their only witness. The evil pair tied up the mother, whose daughter waited unsuspectingly in the car outside. They used a machete, a knife, and a hammer to murder the innocent woman. But the horror was far from over. They exited the holiday home and came across Thelma's young daughter waiting in the car. They callously told the young girl, "We killed your mum," and then bound her up and gagged her. Sickeningly, they then took the 8-year-old into the home where they'd killed her mum and left her there tied up. The 2 Australian tourists who were renting the holiday home then came back and found the crime scene. The 2 killers were tracked down hours later in Thelma's car, which they'd stolen and driven off in. Hayley was actually wearing her victim's earrings at the time. They actually begged for the officers to just shoot them and end their lives, but they wouldn't get away that easily. Thelma's husband, Kevin, wasn't actually allowed to see his wife's body due to the extent of her injuries. The autopsy revealed that she'd fought for her life, with many defensive wounds indicating a struggle. Since the murder, Stephen and Hayley have both tried to blame each other. Stephen was found guilty of second-degree murder and apparently showed no emotion as the verdict was read out. Hayley is currently awaiting trial.
Now that it's summertime, here are 3 of the scariest theme park accidents I've ever heard of. These stories are ordered to get more intense as it goes on, so if the first story is too much for you, then you probably don't want to stick around for the third. On June 21st, 2007, 13-year-old Caitlin Lassiter went to Six Flags of Kentucky. While she was here, she decided to go on the Superman drop ride. This is the kind of ride that lifts you up really high into the air and then it drops you down really fast. However, when their car got to the top, a cable snapped and became undone. This cable became wrapped around Caitlin's throat and feet. She was able to untangle the cord from around her neck, but she wasn't able to get to her feet before the ride dropped, and both of her feet were pulled off. They were able to attach one, but she did end up becoming an amputee. On June 2nd, 2015, the Smiler roller coaster in the UK was having several problems, and one of the test cars got stuck in the middle of the track. However, the employees hadn't communicated with each other that they had added a 5th car, so everyone thought there were 4. So when they saw all 4 cars at the station ready to go, they assumed that the test was done. They then loaded a car full of passengers and sent it down the track, not realizing that a car was already sitting stationary in the middle. The car with passengers inside rear-ended the empty car, resulting in serious injuries. The 2 girls that were sitting in the front of the car had to have their legs amputated. And the horror of this was all made worse because it took emergency services 4 to 5 hours to reach them as everybody was sitting mangled on this roller coaster. The Verrückt water slide was the world's tallest water slide in August 2016, where our third accident happened. This water slide had an extremely steep drop and then a hill, and 3 people would sit in each boat. The owner of the water park had actually self-insured this slide because it was too dangerous for any insurance company to take on. In August 2016, Caleb Schwab went to the water park with his family, and the very first ride he wanted to go on was Verrückt. Caleb sat in the front and was too lightweight to weigh it down, so the ride went airborne. Then everyone watched in horror as the front of the slide impacted the metal safety railing that arched over the top of the slide. He flew out of the raft but hit the netting so hard that he was, you know. It was quick for Caleb, but not for the crowd, as they then had to watch the boat finish the ride as the water began to run red. A guest at the park physically restrained Caleb's mom so she couldn't walk over and see what happened. So the last image she has of her son is excited to go on the ride and stepping into the line.